Roy Murray watches the Chalnoth students torment their smaller classmate for the third time this week. The scene unfolds in the curved hallway of the Intergalactic Academic Exchange Station, where the station's enormous windows frame Jupiter's swirling storms as a rust-colored backdrop. The tall, mantis-like adolescents circle Paya, their chittering sounds carrying notes of mockery as she struggles to input basic commands into her molecular fabricator. Paya's appendages twitch with uneven movements, her sensory stalks withdrawing and extending in an irregular pattern that marks her as different from her perfectly coordinated peers. The lead tormentor, Kraz, towers over her with his impressive height of 12 feet, a testament to his superior genetics according to Chalnoth standards. Observe her inability to maintain proper molecular alignment, Kraz clicks to his companions. A true Chalnoth would have completed this task before their first molt. Roy's hands tighten on his maintenance toolkit. As the station's antimatter containment systems engineer, he's witnessed this scene play out repeatedly in the learning hub. The Chalnoth administration's decision to admit Paya solely due to her family's political connections has made her a target among these academic elites. The molecular fabricator beeps in protest as Paya inputs another sequence, but Roy notices something the others miss. Her seemingly erratic inputs follow a pattern, one that approaches the problem from an entirely different angle. While the standard Chalnoth method relies on linear quantum calculations, Paya's approach incorporates curved spatial reasoning that could bridge the gap between human and Chalnoth engineering protocols. A message flashes across the station's information displays. Attention! Academic evaluation schedule updated. Subject: Pyeth Chusin. Status: final warning. Failure to meet standard cognitive benchmarks will result in immediate deportation to Chalnoth Rehabilitation Compound 7. Roy knows what that means. He's read the reports about the isolation compounds on the Chalnoth homeworld, places where those deemed cognitively insufficient disappear from public view. The thought of Paya's unique mind being locked away makes his stomach turn. The molecular fabricator chirps, displaying a completed molecule. It's not the standard configuration expected by the Chalnoth curriculum, but Roy's engineering background tells him it's a valid, perhaps even superior solution. The other students don't see it. They're too focused on their rigid methodology, their mandated paths to success. As Kraz leads his group away to their advanced mathematics seminar, Roy steps forward. He has 30 days until Paya's evaluation. 30 days to help her translate her unique problem-solving approach into terms the inflexible Chalnoth educational system will accept. 30 days to prevent a brilliant mind from being discarded simply because it processes the universe differently. Roy watched Paya through the curved observation window of Engineering Bay 7 as she traced patterns in the diagnostic readouts with her sensory appendages. Her movements, though irregular by Chalnoth standards, followed a rhythm he'd begun to recognize during their daily sessions. The power fluctuations in Grid B aren't random, Paya clicked, her appendages dancing across multiple screens simultaneously. They form a harmonic sequence when viewed across all subsystems. Roy stepped closer, studying the readouts. Where traditional Chalnoth engineers saw linear data streams requiring sequential analysis, Paya's sensory stalks tracked dozens of variables at once. The display feeds flickered with information most engineers would process one at a time, but Paya absorbed them all, finding connections invisible to others. "Look," she chittered softly, manipulating the holographic data sphere. The patterns repeat every 17 minutes across 6 different subsystems. Roy's eyes widened as he saw its subtle power variations that perfectly predicted maintenance needs before the station's AI flagged them. He documented her observations in his neural pad, adding to his growing database of Paya's unique problem-solving methods. The engineering bay's warning klaxon cut through their session. Red emergency lights bathed the curved walls as the station's AI announced. Critical malfunction detected in antimatter containment cooling array. Initiating emergency protocols. Senior engineer Vetrix burst through the doors, his towering form casting shadows across the diagnostic panels. Clear the bay. This is no place for. The rest of his statement vanished in a cascade of system alerts. Temperature readings from the quantum buffers spiked into critical ranges. Paya moved before anyone could stop her, her appendages flying across multiple control interfaces. The quantum buffers are linked. If we follow standard shutdown procedures, the cascade will silence. Vetrix clicked sharply. We will follow proper Chalnoth engineering protocols. But Roy saw what Paya saw, her irregular movements tracking the complex interplay of failing systems. Standard procedures would take too long, analyzing each buffer sequentially. Buffer 7. Paya's sensory stalks extended fully. Its degradation pattern matches the harmonic sequence from grid B. It's the source. Roy made a split-second decision. He input his override codes, giving Paya access to the containment systems. Her appendages moved in that familiar dance across the controls, isolating the deteriorating buffer while maintaining stabilization fields around its neighbors. The warning klaxons fell silent. Emergency lights faded to standard illumination. Unacceptable breach of protocol, Vetrix clicked, turning to Roy. Your quick thinking saved us from disaster. As for the student, she should not have been present during an engineering emergency. Actually, a new voice interjected from the doorway. I believe we all witnessed something remarkable. Dr. Marcus Collins, the station's chief of research, stepped into the bay. His dark eyes studied the diagnostic readouts, then moved to Paya, who had withdrawn her sensory stalks close to her body. The ability to process multiple system states simultaneously, Dr. Collins continued, to recognize complex patterns across seemingly unrelated variables. These are exactly the kinds of cognitive advances we're here to study. Roy noticed Paya's appendages twitch at the unexpected praise, but before Dr. Collins could continue, another alert flashed across the screens, this one from the Chalnoth Education Council. Attention! Formal complaint filed regarding student Pyeth Chusin. Academic evaluation rescheduled. New date, 14 standard days. Standard protocols will be strictly enforced. Roy recognized the signature Kraz. The timing wasn't coincidental. We have 2 weeks, Dr. Collins said, turning to Roy. I want to develop an alternative evaluation framework, one that demonstrates how Paya's unique cognitive processes could advance both human and Chalnoth engineering. Paya's sensory stalks withdrew further, her appendages moving in increasingly erratic patterns as she processed the news. First, Roy said quietly, placing a steadying hand near her, we need to help her manage these evaluation pressures. Then we can show them how she saved this station using methods they haven't even imagined yet. Roy's neural pad pinged with an incoming message from Dr. Collins. Waste management upgrade approved. Implementing Plan Delta. He glanced at Paya, who continued analyzing the engineering bay's diagnostic feeds. Her recent handling of the antimatter containment crisis had opened a door, and they intended to walk through it. How would you like to work on a real engineering challenge? Roy asked, pulling up the schematics for the station's waste management systems. Something bigger than simulations. Paya's sensory stalks extended with interest as the complex network of interconnected systems appeared before her. The holographic display showed hundreds of subsystems operating in parallel recycling units, purification nodes, and distribution networks spanning multiple decks. The entire network requires upgrading, Roy explained. Most engineers tackle it sequentially, one system at a time. But I've seen how you process multiple data streams simultaneously. Show me what you see. Paya's appendages moved across the display, tracking patterns invisible to others. The purification cycles align with thermal regulation pulses, if we adjust the timing. Her movements quickened. We could upgrade 3 subsystems simultaneously without disrupting core functions. Doctor. Collins entered Engineering Bay 7, tablet in hand. I've arranged for this to count toward your evaluation. We'll document every step, every innovation. A harsh clicking sound interrupted them. Kraz stood in the doorway, his towering form casting long shadows across the bay. Engineering projects require proper certification. This student lacks basic qualifications. Which is why I'll be supervising, Roy stated, entering his authorization codes. Kraz's mandibles twitched. The Education Council will hear about this. Irregularity. He turned sharply and left. Over the next week, Paya's unique approach to the upgrade revealed efficiencies that amazed even veteran engineers. Her ability to process multiple system states simultaneously allowed her to orchestrate complex maintenance sequences that would normally require 3 times the personnel. The warning came during third shift. Multiple alerts flashed across the engineering displays: pressure spikes in recycling conduits, failed safety interlocks, toxic material containment breaches. Emergency protocols initiated, the station AI announced. Evacuating residential sections 12 through 15. Paya moved to the central interface, her appendages flying across multiple control surfaces. The failures are linked. Look at the wave patterns. Roy studied the diagnostic feeds. Where others saw chaos, Paya tracked a deliberate sequence of system failures. Someone had sabotaged the upgrade, but they hadn't counted on Paya's ability to see the bigger picture. Here, she clicked, highlighting intersection points between failing systems. If we redirect flow through secondary channels while maintaining pressure in the tertiary loops. Her solution contained the contamination before it could spread beyond the initial breach points. Security footage later revealed Kraz and 2 supporters accessing restricted maintenance panels hours before the incident. The situation drew Senior Administrator Thax to Engineering Bay 7. The distinguished Chalnoth official studied the emergency logs while Dr. Venn, a prominent neurological specialist, observed Paya's movements. Fascinating, Dr. Venn clicked softly. Her neural patterns suggest enhanced parallel processing capabilities. This could represent an evolutionary advantage in complex system management. Thax's sensory stalks extended fully. The traditional evaluation format seems insufficient for assessing such capabilities. I propose an alternative, Dr. Collins stepped forward. A live engineering challenge. Multiple system interfaces, simultaneous problems requiring innovative solutions. Approved, Thax clicked. But first, let our top students establish the performance baseline. A new presence entered the bay: Ambassador Lena, Paya's mother. Her elaborate ceremonial markings identified her as a high-ranking official. The Educational Reform Act comes before the council next month, she clicked quietly to Roy. My daughter's evaluation could influence the fate of countless others who process information differently. Roy watched Paya continue her work, her movements sure despite the growing pressure. The challenge would begin in 7 days. He had 1 week to help her prepare for a test that could reshape Chalnoth education if she succeeded. The station buzzed with anticipation as news of the unprecedented evaluation spread. Human and Chalnoth officials requested permission to observe, recognizing the potential impact on interspecies educational protocols. Through it all, Paya remained focused on the engineering displays, her irregular movements tracking patterns that could change everything. The evaluation day transformed Engineering Bay 7 into an arena of gleaming displays and holographic interfaces. Kraz and his top students entered first, their movements precise and measured as they took their positions at the testing stations. Multiple observation screens activated overhead, giving the assembled officials clear views of every interaction. Administrator Thax's voice echoed through the bay. Begin evaluation sequence. The simulation sprang to life. Power distribution grids materialized in intricate detail across the displays. Kraz's team moved with textbook precision through the initial protocols, but as cascading system failures multiplied across the grid, their methodical approach faltered. Their appendages struggled to track the simultaneous alerts, each student focusing on individual subsystems while missing critical interconnections. Roy monitored the test parameters from his station, noting irregularities in the baseline readings. The numbers shifted subtly whenever Kraz's team accessed certain systems, small adjustments that simplified the challenge. "Commander Sterling," Roy transmitted through his neural pad, "I need you to verify these data patterns." The security chief's response came swiftly. Working together, they traced the anomalous code through the station's testing frameworks. The trail led directly to Senior Engineer Vetrix's authentication protocols. Security officers escorted Vetrix from the engineering bay. His sensory stalks pulled tight against his body as Commander Sterling read the charges of test manipulation. "The evaluation must proceed, Doctor," Collins stated, examining the compromised systems. "But we can't use these protocols." Thomas Webb arrived from Europa Station during the emergency repairs, his expertise in adaptive learning systems proving invaluable as they reconstructed the testing parameters. They worked through the night, Webb's fingers flying across interfaces as he implemented new security algorithms. Morning brought Paya's evaluation. She stood before the testing station, her appendages moving in their characteristic irregular patterns. The basic sequential challenges caused her visible difficulty. Several Chalnoth officials clicked disapprovingly as she struggled with traditional procedures. The simulation advanced. Multiple system failures erupted across the power grid. Paya's movements changed, her appendages spread wide, each one tracking different data streams simultaneously. Where Kraz's team had seen chaos, she perceived patterns. A violent shudder ran through the station. Warning klaxons blared. "Micrometeoroid impact detected," the AI announced. "Primary power conduit breach in Section 14. The simulation incorporated the live emergency data instantly. Paya's appendages never stopped moving, integrating the real crisis into her existing solutions. Power redistributed across the grid, bypassing damaged sections while maintaining critical systems. Dr. Ven's neural monitoring equipment hummed. "Extraordinary," he clicked softly. "Her cognitive patterns show true parallel processing capabilities. Not sequential analysis, but simultaneous awareness across all systems." The bay doors slid open. Senior Examiner Drax entered with his entourage, their ceremonial markings indicating their council status. His sensory stalks extended rigidly as he surveyed the modified testing setup. "This evaluation format violates council regulations," Drax clicked sharply. "It cannot be considered valid for academic assessment." Ambassador Lena stepped forward, her own markings gleaming. "The format demonstrates essential skills for modern engineering challenges. Council authority supersedes diplomatic intervention in educational matters," Drax responded. "The student will undergo standard evaluation protocols. Now." Paya's appendages trembled slightly, fatigue evident in their movements after hours of intensive testing. But her sensory stalks remained focused on the engineering displays, tracking the ongoing power distribution, adjustments her previous solutions had initiated. Dr. Webb checked his readings. The station systems are still implementing her power management algorithms. Interrupting them now could prepare the traditional testing protocols. Drax clicked, cutting off Webb's warning. Roy stepped forward, his neural pad already transmitting data to Dr. Collins and Commander Sterling. "Senior Examiner, Article 47B of the Human-Chalnoth Academic Cooperation Treaty requires all testing modifications to undergo joint species panel review before rejection." Drax's sensory stalks rippled with agitation. "This is an internal educational matter, which involves both human and Chalnoth testing protocols," Commander Sterling interrupted, striding into the bay. The modified evaluation incorporated station emergency responses. That places it under joint jurisdiction. The mandatory 72-hour review period bought them time. Dr. James Henderson arrived in Medical Bay 3 at 300 hours, his eyes fixed on the neural scan displays. The patterns flickered across multiple screens, data collected during Paya's evaluation. "Look at this," Henderson called to Dr. Collins. His fingers traced distinctive wave formations in Paya's neural activity. "These patterns, they're familiar, Doctor." Marcus Wright from Xenoarchaeology confirmed Henderson's suspicion 6 hours later. He pulled up ancient Chalnoth engineering archives, dating back to their species' golden age of innovation. "The neural signatures match," Wright said, overlaying the historical scans with Paya's. This cognitive pattern was once common among Chalnoth engineers, particularly during their most revolutionary technological advances. In Engineering Bay 5, Chief Engineer Brandon Foster discovered something equally compelling. He rechecked the numbers 3 times, then contacted Roy. "The antimatter containment system," Foster said, pointing to efficiency readings. "It's only operating at 67% capacity. We accepted that as maximum potential under current designs." Paya worked through the night, her appendages moving in their characteristic patterns across multiple interfaces. By morning, she had developed new containment algorithms that pushed efficiency to 94%. The station's engineering crew gathered to witness the implementation. Screens displayed real-time efficiency metrics as Paya's algorithms took effect. The numbers climbed steadily, surpassing all previous benchmarks. High Administrator Krell arrived with a contingent of Chalnoth security officers just as the new system achieved peak efficiency. His towering form filled the doorway of the observation room. "These test results are classified," Krell announced. "All data will be sequestered under national security protocols." Commander Sterling's neural pad pinged. "Transmission complete," she said. "Copies have been received by Europa Station, Mars Colony, and Titan Base. Standard data preservation protocols." The Joint Species Review Panel convened in Conference Chamber 1. Human Federation Representative Thomas Marshall sat at the center table, flanked by both human and Chalnoth officials. Multiple displays showed Paya's evaluation results, historical archives, and the antimatter containment data. "The evidence speaks for itself," Roy presented. "Paya's cognitive patterns represent a valuable adaptation. One that solved our containment crisis, improved station efficiency, and matches historical records of Chalnoth innovation." Ambassador Lena stepped forward. "There are others like my daughter. Their abilities have been masked, suppressed, labeled as deficiencies by our current system." Krell rose from his seat. "If this panel formally accepts these results, all Chalnoth participation in joint engineering projects will be suspended immediately. Then we'll be sacrificing innovation for uniformity," Coordinator Michael Anderson of the Human Space Development Initiative interjected. "These cognitive patterns could revolutionize deep space engineering." Dr. Venn activated a neural imaging display. "The parallel processing capabilities we've observed represent a natural variation in Chalnoth neurology. Our educational systems should adapt to nurture these differences, not suppress them." The panel chambers filled with clicking sounds as heated discussions broke out among the Chalnoth officials. Representative Marshall raised his hand for silence, studying the accumulated evidence on his screens. "We'll proceed with the formal review," Marshall announced. "Every piece of data will be examined, every implication considered." Paya stood at her engineering station, monitoring the enhanced containment systems while the panel deliberated. Her appendages moved steadily across the controls, tracking efficiency metrics that continued to exceed all previous standards. "We have a more immediate way to evaluate these findings," Representative Marshall announced, rising from his seat. Chief Engineer Foster, Prepare for a full systems optimization trial. Foster's fingers flew across his neural pad. Parameters loaded. We can begin in 20 minutes. Krell's sensory stalks twisted sharply. This is highly irregular. This is practical application, Marshall countered. Engineering Bay 1 has been configured for comprehensive system monitoring. Dr. Henderson wheeled in his neural scanning equipment while Commander Sterling's security teams swept the testing area. Multiple scanning frequencies ensured no hidden programs could interfere with the results. Commander William Reed strode into the bay, his Federation insignia gleaming. The Human Space Development Initiative will provide independent verification of all test metrics. Kraz and his team took their positions first. Their movements followed perfect Chalnoth engineering protocols as they accessed the station's systems. Power distribution metrics ticked upward incrementally. Life support efficiency increased by small margins. 0.3% improvement in antimatter containment, Foster noted, within expected parameters for traditional methods. The team's coordinated efforts began to falter as system interactions grew more complex. Power fluctuations in life support created feedback loops in the distribution grid. Efficiency gains in one area triggered losses in others. Multiple interference patterns detected, Reed reported, studying the readouts. Overall system stability decreasing. Paya stepped up to the control interfaces as Kraz's team withdrew. Her appendages spread wide, each one tracking different data streams. Roy and Foster flanked her, monitoring the cascading effects of her adjustments. Neural patterns stabilizing, Henderson called out, watching his screens. Full parallel processing engagement confirmed. The station's systems responded to Paya's inputs. Power distribution losses plummeted as she identified and exploited previously hidden synergies between subsystems. The antimatter containment field's efficiency surged. 97%, Foster announced. New record for containment stability. Paya's appendages never stopped moving as she integrated life support optimization into her calculations. Air recycling metrics shifted into unexplored territories while power consumption dropped. The station's AI issued a priority alert. Solar flare detected. Impact in 18 minutes. We should suspend the trial, Krell clicked urgently. Continue monitoring, Marshall ordered. Paya's movements accelerated. New equations appeared across her displays as she incorporated the approaching solar event into her optimization matrices. The station's shield harmonics began to modulate in unusual patterns. She's reconfiguring the defensive screens, Foster said. These frequencies. The solar flare struck. Energy readings spiked across all systems, then stabilized at higher efficiency levels than before. Paya had turned the potentially disruptive event into an power source. Dr. Richard Torres burst into the observation room, neural data chips clutched in his hands. These patterns match exactly, he exclaimed, plugging the chips into Henderson's equipment. The artifacts we found in the Chalnoth ruins, the designs we couldn't decode, they were created by engineers who thought like her. Ambassador Lena accessed a secure data channel. Ancient engineering schematics filled the main screens. Our greatest achievements came from minds that processed information differently, she clicked. Before the standardization protocols were implemented, Station Director Powell's neural pad chimed with an urgent Federation Council transmission. His eyes widened as he read the message. The Council is proposing a joint research initiative, he announced, with Paya's cognitive approach as the foundation. Krell raised his appendages for attention, but the communications network suddenly terminated. Throughout the station, Chalnoth information channels went dark. External communications are being blocked, Sterling reported. Source appears to be from Krell's security forces. Administrator Thack stepped forward, his ceremonial markings gleaming under the emergency lights. This suppression of information must end, he clicked firmly. We cannot ignore evidence that challenges our assumptions about cognitive development. Paya remained focused on her displays, unaware of the political storm surrounding her work. Her appendages continued their irregular dance across the interfaces as she refined her optimization protocols. New possibilities emerged with each adjustment, each innovation building on the last in ways that transcended traditional sequential analysis. The station hummed with unprecedented efficiency, its systems working in harmony through paths that had always existed, but needed a different kind of mind to discover. In the observation room, humans and Chalnoth watched as years of engineering limitations dissolved under the touch of appendages that moved to their own rhythm. Security analyst Peter Walsh's neural pad lit up with urgent alerts. His fingers flew across the interface, tracking multiple unauthorized access attempts penetrating the station's communication architecture. "Commander Sterling," Walsh called, eyes fixed on cascading data streams. "We have intrusion patterns matching Krell's security encryption protocols." Sterling leaned over Walsh's station, studying the attack vectors. "They're targeting historical archives." Isolate affected systems. In IT control, Kevin Barnes initiated emergency partitions, his neural implant interfacing directly with the station's defense grid. Data preservation protocols engaged, implementing quantum encryption across restricted segments. Roy's voice crackled over the comm. "Barnes, route historical backups through Engineering Bay 3. We'll use Paya's optimization algorithms to create distributed storage nodes." The station's communications suddenly stabilized as a massive shape appeared on the long-range sensors. The UES Defender dropped out of FTL, its hull gleaming under Jupiter's reflected light. "This is Captain James Morrison of the UES Defender," a stern voice announced over the primary channel. "Our sensors detect unauthorized interference with station systems. These actions constitute direct violations of Treaty Sections 12, 15, and 23. Krell security forces withdrew from their positions around the communication hubs. Morrison's timing proved crucial. Ambassador Lena had already begun transmitting Paya's optimization protocols. Implementation confirmed at Ganymede Station, Dr. Collins reported, monitoring the data feeds. Europa and Callisto bases reporting similar results. The antimatter containment efficiency readings from the receiving stations climbed steadily. Dr. Collins highlighted particular spikes in performance: 93% at Ganymede, 95% at Europa. A Chalnoth transport vessel docked at the station's primary bay. Director Vax emerged, his ceremonial markings indicating his position at the Science Academy. His appendages carried secured data cores. 8%. Vax clicked, connecting the cores to the station's research interfaces. "My studies identified this proportion across multiple generations. They learned to hide, to process information in ways our society deemed acceptable." Henderson's neural scanning equipment captured new data as volunteer students began testing Roy's integrated protocols. Mixed teams of traditional and parallel processors tackled complex engineering simulations. Team 3 completed the containment field modulation test, Foster announced. 42% faster than standard completion times. The success metrics accumulated until a critical alert cut through the observation room. Foster's neural pad displayed rapidly deteriorating containment readings. "Microfractures detected in the primary generator housing," he reported. "The field integrity is destabilizing." Emergency protocols activated automatically. Standard containment procedures initiated, but the degradation continued. The generator's enhanced operating parameters had stressed the physical infrastructure beyond normal tolerances. Paya accessed multiple engineering stations simultaneously, her appendages spreading wide to interface with separate control systems. Traditional emergency responses had failed to account for the complex interactions between her optimized systems. Foster's voice carried across Engineering Bay 1. We have less than 3 hours before critical failure. The standard procedures aren't designed for these efficiency levels. The station's systems responded to Paya's inputs as she developed new approaches to field stabilization. Her neural patterns, displayed on Henderson's monitors, showed unprecedented levels of parallel processing as she calculated containment solutions that incorporated both traditional and innovative methodologies. Barnes routed additional processing power to Engineering Bay 1. Simulation capabilities at maximum. All non-essential systems diverted. Krell entered the observation room, his sensory stalks rigid with tension. The impending crisis had temporarily overshadowed political maneuvering. His attention fixed on Paya's displays as she worked, watching efficiency metrics that defied traditional Chalnoth engineering principles. The fractures in the generator housing continued to spread. Each passing minute brought the station closer to catastrophic containment failure. Yet Paya's appendages moved steadily across the interfaces, implementing solutions that merged conventional engineering with revolutionary approaches. Foster studied the containment readings, tracking the results of Paya's modifications. The numbers fluctuated as new algorithms took effect, testing the boundaries between standard protocols and innovative methodologies. Containment field stabilizing, Barnes reported. But the generator housing integrity is still declining. We need a permanent solution within the next hour. 2 hours, 4 to 3 minutes until critical failure, the station's AI announced. Roy studied the spreading microfractures displayed across the monitoring screens. Paya, what do you see in these patterns? Paya's appendages traced across multiple displays simultaneously, each one tracking different aspects of the deteriorating containment field. Her neural patterns spiked on Henderson's monitors as she processed the complex interactions between systems. The stress points follow a geometric progression, Foster noted, highlighting sections of the diagnostic readout. Standard containment protocols can't compensate for the enhanced efficiency levels. Paya's movements suddenly accelerated. New equations filled her displays as she mapped the fracture propagation against power distribution matrices. Through her unique parallel processing, she identified an underlying pattern that traditional sequential analysis had missed. She's modeling a dynamic containment solution, Roy said, watching numbers cascade across the screens. The field can be modified to distribute stress points across multiple generators. Foster's eyes widened. That would require simultaneous control of 12 different subsystems. It's never been attempted. Roy turned to Barnes. I need full access to fabrication resources. Now. While Barnes rerouted station resources, Krell burst into the control room. Evacuation protocols must be initiated immediately. This facility cannot belay that order, Captain Morrison's voice cut through the comm system. The UES Defender maintains authority over station security under Treaty Section 47. Roy's fingers flew across the fabrication console, designing a modified interface that could handle Paya's multiple inputs. The standard control systems weren't built for her level of parallel processing. Fabrication complete, Barnes announced as the new interface emerged from the station's manufacturing bay. Foster reconfigured the emergency protocols while Roy installed the custom interface. Paya spread her appendages wide, connecting simultaneously with all 12 control systems. Her displays filled with overlapping data streams as she began implementing her solution. Containment field harmonics shifting, Foster reported. She's creating a rotating stress distribution pattern. The primary generator's warning alerts intensified. Metal groaned as the physical housing approached critical stress levels. Paya's appendages moved in precise patterns across her custom interface, orchestrating a complex power transfer sequence through the secondary systems. Power distribution stabilizing, Barnes called out, field integrity increasing. The fracture propagation slowed, then stopped as Paya's dynamic containment field took full effect. Efficiency metrics climbed steadily as she refined the rotating stress pattern. Containment field at 98% stability, Foster announced. All systems nominal. Administrator Thax entered the control room, observing the unprecedented efficiency readings. The Science Council will convene immediately to revise our educational protocols. Kraz stepped forward, his sensory stalks lowered. I was wrong about parallel processing methodologies. My prejudices nearly cost us the station. 1 month later, Roy watched Paya accept her dual engineering certification in the main assembly hall. Human and Chalnoth engineers alike studied her optimization protocols, seeking to understand her unique approach to complex systems. Director Powell activated the main display, showing the newly upgraded containment system. The Paya protocol will serve as the foundation for future engineering advancement across both our species. Through the observation window, the antimatter core pulsed with steady efficiency. In Engineering Bay 3, a mixed class of human and Chalnoth students gathered for their first lesson in parallel processing techniques.